Bonjour, ici Piero Giorgio. Alors aujourd'hui, nous sommes au départ pour New York pour rencontrer James Howard Kunstler. Le passeport est prêt. Et hop, dans la bétaillère. And here we are, we should be arriving nearly. And here we are. Hey!
Hey, Piero! Che se dici, Piero?
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, man.
Hey, really great to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Come on in.
Thank you. So this is your place.
This is my establishment.
Wow. It's a lovely area here.
Thank you very much.
Wasn't easy to find, but it's nice.
Yeah. In fact, you know what? Let's see.
Well, James, thanks for having me in your house.
It's a pleasure to see you finally in person.
Well, it's great to finally meet after having worked on each other's books forward, and we'd like to talk to our French readers about your book, Too Much Magic, translated into French. First thing that comes to mind is that before we talk about the book itself, you've been living here for a few years, and obviously you chose to live outside of the cities.
Yeah.
If we take some of the work that you've done, you've wrote many books, of course, for many years. The ones that I noted to be extremely pertinent for the people who want to understand where our world is going, I really think these three, the Geography of Nowhere, I mentioned those in the foreword that I wrote for your book, that I consider this book fundamental for anyone who wants to understand. Geography of Nowhere, The Long Emergency, and of course Too Much Magic. What's the connection between these three books?
Well, of course, they were written in a sequence. And the Geography of Nowhere was about the disposition of the American landscape and the living arrangement that we've imposed on it. And I wrote that in the early 1990s. And at that time, you couldn't fail to notice that we were putting a tremendous amount of investment in a living arrangement that was liable to get into trouble. And to get into trouble before the end of its design life. And I say that because I had a pretty long history with these issues, going back to my early days as a newspaper reporter, when I covered the 1973 OPEC oil embargo as a story. I was a young reporter on a newspaper when this event happened, around the time of the 1973 war between Israel and its enemies, and the OPEC oil states retaliated by messing with the oil distribution system, or at least threatening to do it. It was never clear whether they actually withheld any oil or whether they just frightened the market so much that they created a disruption. In any case, there was a disruption that lasted for a matter of weeks. And when that happened, you could see the American living arrangement just fall apart overnight. As soon as as soon as there was any question about your ability to motor around wherever you wanted to go or to deliver goods, all of the supply chains started to collapse, and all of people's daily routines were greatly interrupted. And it made an impression on me at the age of 25 about how fragile the American living arrangement was. Well, some years later, I wrote several books about the issues of suburbia, the remedies of suburbia, that is, good urban design. And I got involved with a reform group that was working very hard in America to improve our standards of construction and the deployment of the human imprint on the landscape, and to return to traditional principles of town making. So I was really involved in that. But then something happened in the middle 90s. In the middle 90s, a group of senior geologists started to retire out of the oil industry. And they started to publish their dark and secret thoughts about the destiny of the oil industry. And the conclusion they were coming to was pretty clear. By the way, this group included Colin Campbell, who was a senior geologist, I think, for Total, and Jean Laherrère, who was the senior geologist for another European oil company, and a number of other characters started to publish their view of the statistics and the what they understood about where things were going. And the message was very clear that we were going to get into trouble with the oil supply sooner rather than later, probably in the very early 21st century, probably the first decade. And the world was completely unprepared for this. This material was being published, by the way, in pretty obscure journals, the professional journals of the oil industry, which were not really read by civilians, right? But another interesting thing happened around the same time. The internet was starting to expand, really to reach the public after, having been started as a military communications network. All of a sudden, in the late 90s, it was starting to be a major civilian communications facility. And people began to pay attention to this stuff that was being published about oil. And it started to get on the internet, and it started to make a big impression on people, and on me. And I started to look into it, along with other people like Richard Heinberg and that guy at the University of Southern California. I think his name is Goodson, and a lot of people were starting to pay attention to this. And the upshot of that was that people were drawing conclusions that the advanced techno-industrial civilization was liable to do very poorly in a future of restricted oil supplies. You couldn't fail to understand this. Then, if you looked at it a little further, it became obvious that a lot of the so-called alternatives probably were not going to successfully take the place of oil and gas and coal, but especially oil, because a lot of this was a liquid fuel issue, because a lot of it was really about transportation, about moving stuff around, and commerce and trade and manufacturing, and all these things that are the very basis of industrial economies. And so we began to notice that, first of all, there was a lot of wishful thinking and propaganda out there. People who wanted to believe that we could continue to live exactly the way we're living now by other means, that we could all drive electric cars and that we would run all the electricity by fuel cells, and we would have a hydrogen economy. And there was a lot of propaganda out there, some of it coming from people who had a lot of credibility. People like Amory Lovins at the Rocky Mountain Institute, who was, a beloved science figure from the environmental movement. And he was putting out all this propaganda about how we were going to change the cost structures and, we were going to use different fuels. And a lot of it was bullshit. And the closer you looked at it, the more you realized that we're not going to have an alternative energy system without an underlying support of a fossil fuel economy. You couldn't manufacture the hardware for all the solar panels and the wind turbines. You couldn't have the advanced metallurgy, all of these considerations. And the scale of it all was wrong. I think one of the conclusions that I came to, and many other people came to, yourself included, was that we would have to change the scale of virtually all the activities of everyday life, because they were all ramped up to the scale of the greatest efficiency for fossil fuels. But when you withdrew the fossil fuels, all of a sudden these things wouldn't work. Industrial agriculture would not work. You couldn't feed the planet anymore unless you had, this industrial agriculture thing. If you moved it down to a smaller scale, where you have smaller farms that require much more human attention and fewer machines, and really a lot more traditional forms of farming, perhaps with the addition of the knowledge that we've acquired, in recent times, because that's a big thing. Having the knowledge for doing organic agriculture and no-till agriculture and permaculture. These are serious advances, just as the advances of the 19th century for what they used to call scientific farming. These were important advances, crop rotation, etc. But still, we're going to have a problem not having fertilizers like the phosphates and the nitrogenous fertilizers that have made it possible to feed so many people. So, to answer your question, I think, I started out writing about just the living arrangement in America because it was, first of all, it was horrible. Living in this milieu with no good public space, with poor connections between work and home and recreation, and this institutional failure, of not having the social infrastructure. And people like me, we would go to Europe and we would see all of this urban infrastructure still in place, working beautifully at every scale, at the scale of the village and the big town and the big city. You still had people living in the cafe, and you still had people in Italy. You had the evening assembly of people in the town piazza, and you saw the life being lived still in a very civilized human way that was absent in America. And this process was so insidious in America that we forgot what it was that we lost. So I wanted to write about that. But so once you get past that and started to understand the energy equation, it became obvious that we were going to have a big problem. And finally, there was one other piece to the puzzle, was that once you started to understand the energy part of the equation, you couldn't fail to notice how it was connected to the financial part of the system. And they were mutually dependent, and that you could see that the financial system had already become very unstable. And of course, you know, the Long Emergency was published in 2005, and I wrote about the housing mortgage misbehavior that was going on, and the securities fraud that was connected to the mortgages. And I wrote about that, 4 years before it happened, and then in 2008, the whole thing fell apart.
Actually, this is Long Emergency. This is the first book I wrote about you. This is my original copy, and it's still annotated. I still have notes that helped me to write my own book.
Thank you.
And of course, it's an amazingly. It was the first book that had, as you say, the link between energy, between finance, and between infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And obviously, its conclusion is quite pessimistic. Was quite pessimistic then. And specifically about not only the infrastructure, but also the mindset of Americans, people living in the United States, which is still today the world's largest economy. It's a very large country. It weighs a lot in terms of military power in the world. It also influences geopolitics around the world in a massive scale, of course. And that's how I found Too Much Magic even more pessimistic than The Long Emergency, and at the same time it's written with a lot of, I think, sense of humor. And
as Samuel Beckett once said, nothing is funnier than unhappiness.
And actually it's, and I would say to our French readers, the French translation is very well translated, I thought, and keeps a lot of that sense of humor.
Good.
So because we want to take, our in between the lines, what one has to conclude is that our fate is not very bright. But we have to do it we have to keep our sense of humor.
Yes, and that's part of being civilized, of course.
So what brought you to go to this book to talk really about why America is failing?
Well, because you sort of said it yourself, that we have this failure of the physical infrastructure, but the failure of the mental infrastructure is more difficult to see, because it's in the psychology, it's in the behavior. And I would say that the destruction of this mental infrastructure in the United States has been devastating. To see the way, first of all, it's very visible among the proletariat, of course, because they're turning themselves into savages, visibly, with the tattoos and the piercings and the bad behavior. And so that's easy to see. What's harder to see is the disintegration of the ability to think among the classes of people who generally do the thinking for society. And so what, the most conspicuous failure was this wishful thinking about technology. And this was broadly manifested in the media and the books and the television and the public statements and the policy, and all of the efforts of the intellectual classes in America were being turned in toward this task of trying to imagine that we could keep on living exactly the same way by other means. And it was all a fraud. You had all these people at the elite universities like MIT and Harvard, trying to put across this story that we're going to be able to keep on driving to Walmart forever because of lasers or shale gas or hydrogen or dark matter or some some energy system that has not been never been demonstrated to have a commercial value like the thorium reactor. And so you have this whole intellectual class and including people who ought to know better in the sciences, the hard sciences, who are pimping for systems that are never going to rescue us in the way that they imagine. And so they did a terrible disservice to the culture because all of this propaganda that allowed people to think that we could continue to live exactly the way we are now with very little interruption did not allow us to put any of our attention and our effort into making real preparations for the very severe changes that we're going to have to make. We're going to have to make everything smaller. We're going to have to make everything more local. We're going to have to return to a lot of craft activity. We're going to have to prepare to lose things that we've depended on. For example, we've computerized all of the systems for daily life that we depend on, the water system, the sewer system. We're going to have to change that because those systems are going to break and they won't work without the computers. We have to make them manual systems now. We're not doing anything, In the United States, one of the conspicuous failures is we have done nothing to repair the regular railroad system, the old railroad system. We missed the opportunity to build the high-speed rail, okay? The Europeans did that, the Chinese did that, the Japanese did that. We did not do that, and now it's too late because the capital is not there anymore. But we still have this large network of conventional rails that we're desperately in need of fixing, because the happy motoring system of everybody having their own car, this is not going to continue for more than another decade. And we're pretending that it will. And, once again, in this situation, the science people with the good reputations come into the picture and they say, oh, well, everybody's going to have a Tesla car. So don't worry about the gasoline. Don't worry about the cars. The car system is going to fail for the mass motoring system is going to fail for reasons that go way beyond what kind of power the vehicle has. First of all, the failures will be largely financial. People in the United States, I don't know about Europe, but in the United States, mostly buy their cars with bank loans or some kind of financing. And so one of the phenomena that's happening now is that the financial system is destabilizing. The capital formation is impaired. There's less capital available for the loans for the cars. There are fewer people who qualify for the loans because the middle class is shrinking. And so the people are not going to be able to buy any kind of a car. It doesn't matter whether it's electric or internal combustion. The governments at every level, the town, the county or the province, the state, the national government, all these governments are going broke. They've all spent too much money and they've borrowed too much money, and we will soon get to the point where they can't afford to repair the roads. We have these elaborate hierarchies of roadways, from the little lane behind your house to the 7-lane superhighway. We're not going to be able to fix these things, and there will be a triage process, of course, where we'll decide these things will get fixed and these things will never get fixed. So that's going to be a big failure. And of course, there's the whole laughable element of the electric car, which is that people think that you power it from the plug in the wall. But no, there actually has to be something that puts the power in the plug, and that's the coal-fired electric generating plant. So basically, these are coal-powered cars, right? And then that, of course, speaks to the problem of the carbon dioxide in the air and how we're destroying the atmosphere. So, there are so many chains of consequence to all of these problems, and they're so poorly thought out by the thinking classes. The people that you depend on in your culture to do the thinking for your society are no longer able to think. And that's just an incredible dynamic.
And that's why this magical thought, which is non-rational, and it's in a way the hope in the supernatural in a sort of way is really magical. That's why I think that the title is aptly named Too Much Magic. Now the consequences, and of course in your book you talk about this kind of thought. You talk about the reliance on the narcissistic enhancing technology, the techno-narcissism.
Yeah. Techno-grandiosity.
You talk about the towns of the future that are unadapted to what is coming. Because a lot of Europeans will say, well, how is that applying to us? And I always tell to them, look, first of all, this book explains what's going to happen to one of the engines of the world's economy. And if that engine falls down, it will have impact on everyone. The second element is that, and you mentioned that, there is a futility of politics. And a lot of people still believe that, well, if we could vote for that guy or that party, or the Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, whatever, then there will be a solution. And I tend to agree with you, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more what you think. Why is it too late or hopeless at that point?
I actually don't feel that is hopeless. I just think that there's a low percentage of success, of the possibility of success. I don't think it's hopeless. It's conceivable. It's within the realm of possibility that a new consensus could form, and that it could produce a coherent political faction that could make something happen. We saw this in the United States 150 years ago, where in the 1850s in America, you had this terrible problem of slavery. Yeah. And both of the major political parties of the day were unable to articulate how we were going to resolve this problem. And in fact, the dominant political party of that day in America was called the Whigs, W-H-I-G-S. And they had been previously a kind of reform party. But they had no ability to address the slavery issue. And the whole issue was coming to a point of criticality. And at the moment of criticality, the Whig Party disappeared. And out of the ashes of the Whig Party came this new Republican Party. They first entered the national election of 1856 with a candidate for president named John Fremont, who was a Western explorer, kind of a dashing adventurer, And he lost the election, obviously, but the next election was 1860, and they nominated this railroad lawyer from Illinois named Abraham Lincoln. And he might not have seemed at the time to be an extraordinary personality, but it turned out that he was a person with great literary gifts, which included a tremendous ability to communicate the terms of this struggle and to make it very clear, but also to do it in a poetic way that marshaled the emotions and the spirit of the people. And of course, the election of Lincoln led very quickly to the Civil War. As soon as he was elected, several southern states dropped out of the federal union, and then there was a struggle to keep the union together. And Lincoln, of course, was the supreme commander of all that. And then, of course, he was turned into a saint at the end of the struggle by being shot, right? And he wasn't a saint, but he was truly a great figure. So my point is that in the United States and elsewhere, we've seen these things resolve in different ways. In France, there was the calamity of the revolution. It's understandable that it took place because the old system was finished. But it produced, a decade and a half of chaos and bloodshed that was terrible. And, then in 1796, this artillery officer from Corsica comes along, and he proves to be one of the only competent people left in Paris at a certain particular time, and everybody turns to him and they say, "Oh, look what this guy can do. He can disperse the mob. He can make things happen. He can raise an army and go over to Naples and conquer Naples. He can do this, he can do that." And before you know it, you have Napoleon. And, Napoleon had the good part and the bad part, The bad part, of course, was that he was always wanted to be fighting a war. The good part was he he set into motion a tremendous engineering project in France, which resulted in the great infrastructure of the 19th century. Eventually, it was the canals, eventually the railroads, not during Napoleon's time, but eventually. The school system, the organization, political organization of the state with the departments, the legal system, which is still functioning, right? The Napoleonic Code.
Yes.
So, and then of course you have the really bad example in history of Hitler. Yeah. Where you have a country that is in a tremendous crisis, and they can't resolve the crisis, and they turn to this terrible figure with a terrible gang of people around him, and terrible things happen.
I agree.
So I'm not hopeless about politics, but I'm very aware that a lot of strange things can happen. And also, one more thing. We've never quite seen a crisis of this kind before. This is not like the previous crisis. This is a very new thing. This is a real threat to industrial civilization.
One big difference between then and now is that, of course, the world's population at Napoleon's was 1 billion. The world's population during the 1930s was 2.5, maybe 3 billion. And now we're at 7, going towards 8, and perhaps soon 9. Very fast. The pressure, the infrastructure that we have now, the just-in-time systems that enable the supply on demand of food, spare parts, medication, is incredibly more complex. And society is much more reliant on complex infrastructures which require energy. Today's crises and tomorrow's crises are going to be much more difficult to manage than in the past.
Yeah. Yes, and I think that's, of course, where much of the gloom comes from and the pessimism, because, for one thing, there's no question that the population will have to go down. Now, let's remember that human beings don't live forever in any case. So sooner or later, whoever is on stage now is not going to be here at some future point. I think that most of us who are civilized would like this process to occur as humanely as possible. We have no idea how we're going to do it. We don't want to think about euthanasia. We don't want to think about the usual suspects who ride on the stage on their horses, with their cloaks on and their the scythe and and the skeleton on the horse. We don't want to think about that, but it's pretty obvious that we're going to be faced with scarcity of food, which leads to famine, of course, and starvation. We will probably be subject to epidemic diseases. It takes very little in the way of civil disorder for diseases to establish themselves. When you have civil disorder and people are moving around and they're displaced from home, and it rains and they get wet and they get sick, and the water system breaks down and they're drinking dirty water and they get typhus and the disease spreads and you get other diseases. This is also a moment in history when you have a lot of diseases have moved around from one part of the world to another. And so, just in the United States, we have all kinds of subtropical and tropical diseases now moving up. We have no idea how that's going to shake out. We have the problem of antibiotics losing their potency because the bacteria have been exposed to them now for half a century, and they've mutated and created their own defense. So there's a lot to worry about with that. And of course, there's the prospect of war. I think we can probably agree that the population pressures, even though they're not felt directly every day, especially by people in Western cultures and advanced cultures, I think that they're making us crazy. And it may be one of the things that's behind this mysterious loss of the ability to think clearly by the so-called thinking classes. It may be that there is some kind of a subconscious apprehension by the group, a collective sense in the group that something bad is coming, and it's making people quietly desperate and crazy. First of all, they're desperate to believe that their current system of life can continue. So they put all this effort into, imagining that they can, that we can keep on living like this. We can keep on living in the skyscraper buildings, and we can keep on driving around Dallas, Texas. So it's a kind of a mass madness. But in the final analysis, the population is going to go down. And did I answer that question?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I just rambled on.
No, it's you've always been writing novels.
Yes.
Some of the latest novels you wrote are in the series The World Made by Hand, and I really enjoyed reading the first two ones. And I received the day before yesterday, before I took the plane to come here and meet you, the latest one, History of the Future. In those novels, you I think brilliantly describe an example of how could life be in a post-long emergency world where the magic has been dispelled.
Yeah.
And suddenly the mundane practicalities become very much of eating, heating, cooking, and the relationships within people become of the utmost importance.
Yeah.
I've not read the latest one. Can you tell us a little bit of how did you come to write about that?
Well, I had written this book, The Long Emergency, and I had written these critical books about the American living arrangement, and these were nonfiction books. They were, reporting. But it was important to me to write fiction just as a professional. I wanted to continue. But I also wanted to convey these issues to the audience in a different way than reporting. I wanted to reach them through their emotions, and their sensations, and I wanted them to feel what it would be like to live in that new future world. So I wanted to write about, what people were eating and what the tastes and the sensations of that new world would be, and what it would be like to live more connected with nature and the seasons and the hours of the day and the heat and the cold, and how the new social arrangements would dispose themselves. And I wanted to really create a vivid picture of the future in a plausible way, that wasn't silly.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to hang this all. I had to hang a dramatic story on it, or really more properly, a series of dramatic incidents, because I had always conceived of the series being 4 books, one for each season of the year. That was important to me as a formal exercise. And I knew that it wasn't going to just be one story, that, it would be a set of incidents in this book and another set of incidents in this. So the first book is really introducing us to this world of a small town in the provinces of New York State, 200 miles, about what is 300 kilometers north of New York City. Pretty isolated. The electricity is not working anymore. The internet is gone. All of the institutions that people used to hang their life on are gone. No corporations anymore. There's no school system. The courts are no longer functioning. So the law is not functioning very well. People have nothing left to hang their life on. Agriculture and farming has come back to the center of economic life, and along with the activities that come out of farming and support farming. And all of these people and these characters who used to work in office jobs are now doing, the hands-on work of daily life. In short, life is becoming kind of medieval again. They don't think of it too consciously that way. Some of them do. And I wanted to illustrate this in a dramatic way that would grab people by their imagination. There's another thing that's going on, which is the psychology of the people involved. And I have various groups of people. They're kind of, you might even think of them as tribes. But there are the normal townspeople. And then there is a group of Christian evangelical religious cultists from Virginia, which is in the southern part of America. And I depict the southern part of America as being very disorderly politically in this period. Mm-hmm. And they've left. So in these stories, in this book, I've got the townspeople. They're just ordinary people who have been, through this ordeal and this tribulation. And I've got this group of people who have moved up from Virginia. It's a religious Christian evangelical cult. And I depict the American South as being a pretty disorderly place. And they've left there to find peace and tranquility in the North. And the townspeople are actually very demoralized and discouraged and depressed as a group, because they have been let down by the promises of technology, and in fact, they have begun to feel disappointed about the whole baggage of the Enlightenment. Science, technology, empirical thinking, all of the things that became the normal structure of civilized thought in our time are now in disrepute. But they don't really know what to do about it. And it has made them very passive and depressed. This, on the other hand, this cult of religious people, they have a totally different worldview. They are comfortable with the demise of the technological industrial economy and culture. and they are tuned into the re-enchantment of the world. And by that I mean a kind of neo-medieval frame of mind that is not altogether a negative thing. It has to do with once again becoming part of the rhythms of the world, of the natural world, and so there's quite a contrast between the psychological demeanor of these religious people and the psychological demeanor of these very depressed and disappointed townspeople. I myself am not religious, but I do think that people will be very disappointed with the results of techno-industrial society. And I do think that we're going to see the rebirth of a re-enchanted, superstitious world. I don't know how that's going to work out exactly. There is reason to believe that it might cause a lot of problems, but I think it's going to happen.
In your latest novel, The History of the Future, I've not had time to read it yet. What is how does the story continue the previous ones?
Well, there are really two things going on in this book. This book takes place in the winter. It begins just a couple of days before Christmas, and there's been a murder in the town, and so a continuing theme in all of these books is the question of how does law function, and how does a society function in the absence of an elaborate court system and an elaborate justice system. The answer, of course, is they have to make it up as they go along. And so part of the story is how the people of this town deal with the murder. But within that story, or within the book, there's another thing going on. The son of the main character in the first book, he's been referred to several times in all the books. His name is Daniel, and he's gone off into America to see what happened to the country. And in this book, we find out. And he has a series of adventures going down the old Erie Canal, which is still functioning. And he has some adventures in the Great Lakes. And his destiny takes him to the center of America, where a breakaway republic exists. It calls itself the Foxfire Republic, and it's a kind of a Tea Party breakaway neo-confederacy. They want to fight the Civil War all over again. And the leader of this new breakaway republic, it's called the Foxfire Republic. That's what they call themselves. The Foxfire Republic. The leader is a lady who used to be a country singer and a television evangelist. So she's a real kind of Southern archetype. She's also a rather glamorous figure who has a weakness for young men.
Don't they all in that job?
So you can put two and two together and see where that's leading. And so that's what it is. It's, the continuation of the story of the people in Union Grove, New York, my fictional little town, and the people of the Foxfire Republic. And also, a part of the book takes place in among the remnant of the American federal government, which is depicted as having relocated to a small town on Lake Huron, one of the Great Lakes.
Interesting. And I know that writers don't like to talk about the next books. So
no, I can talk about it. I'm writing the fourth one.
What's the fourth one going to be about?
Well, the fourth one, they've all taken place in a certain season. The fourth one takes place in the spring. It's a time of the year that they used to call the 6 weeks want. The 6 weeks want, meaning that for this period of more than a month, they don't have any leftover food from last year, or very little of it, and the new food is not ready to eat yet from the garden. or the farm. And so that's the time of year when people are really struggling to eat and get by. So the title of the fourth installment is The 6 Weeks Want. It takes place in the spring. Because the third one was about a right-wing political character, the fourth one is going to be about a left-wing, politically correct despot who comes from Massachusetts.
You mean Barack Obama or
No.
John Kerry are going to survive in the world?
No, it's not. It's a totally different kinds of character. He's this character from Massachusetts comes over with an army of his own warriors, basically, and tries to bully the town into giving up, their gold and their whatever capital they have. And but he's a residual, he's a residual socialist from this time, and he's full of all of this dishonest propaganda about an idealism about the world. And so I already depicted a right-wing fanatic. Now I want to depict a left-wing fanatic, so that I can cover all of the political bases.
Can't wait to read that.
It's fun. It's fun. This one's fun too.
I just received a few days ago. Now, one of the you live in far away from the cities.
I do.
I'm gonna redo that.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's short nights.
Yeah, I know.
Now you live far away from the cities. You live in a beautiful area here. One of the things that I've tried to do in my books, is to try to give day-to-day solutions to basically the same analysis and the same long emergency, and I call that the economic collapse, that is going to probably happen. Now, what is interesting is that I see that you live here in just the same way as I describe in my books. Your house is your, what I call, sustainable autonomous base. You have your gardening, your
fruit trees,
the water,
chickens,
solar panels. The network with the local people is important. I assume you know how to defend yourself if needed. All these elements are really something that a lot of authors like Chris Martinson and others, yourself and others, and myself, there's no one keeping. If you really believe what we write, we don't live anymore in Manhattan, in Paris, in the big cities, and we have to eat our own dog food. We have to do it. What led you to? Is that the process you took?
Well, I'm very fortunate, perhaps, because I was psychologically disposed to this outcome, for the simple reason that I grew up in the center of New York City. I grew up in Manhattan, and I was completely done with it by the time I was 17 years old. I had enough of it. I never had that impulse that a lot of my friends have to, I must move to New York City. For me, I just wanted to get out, and I stayed out. And so, on the other hand, I have an intellectual realization that the cities have attained a scale that simply can't continue, and that there's certainly an argument that city life as we know it today, in many ways, is in fact a glorious thing. If you can manage to do it right now in history, living in New York City must be a lot of fun. And if you have the money and you can do it, it must be fun. 10 years from now, I don't think it's going to be so much fun. I think the big cities are going to have to contract a lot. I think the process is going to be very disruptive. I think there are going to be big fights over how it occurs, who gets to occupy the center, the old center, and what is the fate of the banlieue, the periphery. I think there's going to be a tremendous loss of wealth in real estate. I think a lot of the infrastructure is fucked. Can I say that?
Yeah, you can.
I don't think we're going to be able to continue to fix the water systems, the sewer systems. You know, in New York City, for example, the subway system was invaded by seawater from a hurricane 2 years ago. And we have reason to believe that it could easily happen again, and especially if the sea level continues to creep up. So all of those things add up to a picture of a world with new requirements for daily life. And I think that it's obvious that the cities are, as they're currently constituted, are not really suited to the requirements of the future. They're not scaled to the resource and capital realities that are coming. And it's also, I think, pretty obvious that to me that the places that will be successful are the places that are smaller, the places that are scaled better to the economic realities of the future, and the places that have a meaningful relationship with farming and food production. That leaves a lot of American cities in the category of not very promising. For example, I wouldn't want to make the mistake of trying to make a life in Phoenix, Arizona, or Southern California. Indeed, most of the American Southwest. It's been a very appealing place to live during the auto age and the oil age. You could run the air conditioners as much as you wanted to in Phoenix, Arizona for this period of time. 20 years from now, I doubt that we're going to be able to do that. And, you can't have a civilized life in Phoenix without air conditioning for everybody, not just for the rich people. The poor people have to do it too, or they'll leave. It's too brutal. You can't live there without it. There's a reason that people didn't live there in great numbers before 1960. All of these things indicate to me that it would be a much wiser thing to move to a small town, to a small city. And in America, we're fortunate that, we have a lot of pretty good small cities that haven't been used very much for the last 40 years. They were deactivated and disinvested in, and they're sitting there waiting to be re-inhabited. In many cases, like the cities of the Hudson Valley here in the Northeast, they're full of wonderful old buildings that are sitting there waiting to be reused and put back into service. And in places in the West, it's a little different because they never had anything except suburbia. Those places are going to be in trouble. I think you can state categorically that the American suburbs are going to lose value, to say the least. So, I've made my choices. I'm actually not living in the wilderness here. I'm living on a piece of property that is off of the last street in town. So you can literally walk into the main street business center from this house in 10 minutes. And that was an important consideration for me. I didn't want to be, 10 kilometers outside of town. But I did want to have enough land to have a substantial garden and to grow a lot of fruit trees. So I came to this little, I lived in another town 15 miles west of here, and it's a good town. It's called Saratoga Springs, New York. It was an old resort town for the mineral baths and the mineral waters in the 19th century. It's still a pretty prosperous town, unlike most of the towns like it in this region. But I moved out of there 2.5 years ago to this place, and I planted about 30 fruit trees and a lot of berry bushes. And I built a chicken house, and I put a lot of fences up, and I made a big garden, and I made a big hoop house, we call it. It's a plastic-covered structure for growing certain kinds of vegetables in the cold weather. You can grow kale and cabbage and some other things right through the winter, even in this climate where it gets very cold. Spinach. So that's working out all right. I'm getting on in my age. I'm 65 years old, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to be here. But this place, and I'm not married at the moment, but this place would probably function pretty well for the next person who lives here. I don't know how orderly the region is going to be. Whether the place will be able to stay civilized. My guess is that it probably will. I think there will be parts of America that will be pretty bad.
Yeah, we don't want to live in Los Angeles.
No, or Phoenix, or Houston, or Atlanta. There's a long list of places that are probably going to be tough to live in. I think that we're there. I think we will probably see some significant demographic movement of people in large numbers leaving one place and going to another place. I think there are some places right now that are deeply undervalued. For example, the region around the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes is like a freshwater Mediterranean Sea. It's really a marvelous thing. It's got so much shoreline. And the land around it is some of the best agricultural land in North America. And if the climate gets a little bit warmer, it might even help, especially on the Canadian side.
Yeah, sure.
So I think that, for example, that's a very undervalued region of America. I believe that the inland waterway system of this continent, and probably of Europe too, is going to regain importance that it lost in the last 50 years of air travel. I think a lot more stuff is going to move on the rivers and the canals, and that the towns and cities that are on these bodies or these waterways will regain importance. Right now, they are some of the most devastated cities in America. Places like St. Louis and Kansas City and Davenport, Iowa, the Quad Cities, and Iowa and Illinois. The places along the Ohio River, Louisville. These are cities that are very, very depressed, but they have a great potential for gaining vitality again when it becomes necessary to use the river for commerce. I have a special set of considerations for New York. New York has made a terrible error of building too many skyscrapers. The skyscraper is obsolete, and it's not necessarily because of the heat or the air conditioning or even the elevators. The elevators actually take very little energy to run because they're all run on counterweights, right? The real issue with the skyscrapers is they'll never be renovated. We're not going to have the capital, and we're not going to have the modular fabricated materials to renovate the buildings, even things that seem as simple as sheetrock, the gypsum board. Yeah. It requires tremendous manufacturing procedures and long supply lines, and actually it's rather expensive to manufacture the stuff. And but the aluminum sashes and the steel I-beams and the giant glazing for the cladding on the windows, and these buildings are not going to be fixed. They have one generation left of life, and the ones that were built most recently will never. They'll only have one generation of life. Another thing that is a problem that we're not paying any attention to is the financial organization of such a building. This system came along called the condominium system, where you deconstruct the property rights of a megastructure, and then you reassign the property rights to all these many individual owners. And then you have a property association that takes care of the building, right? But in the economic collapse that we are writing about, we have every reason to believe that the property associations will fail. It doesn't take a large number of owners of the pieces of the building to stop paying their fees for the property association to fail. And when that happens, the maintenance of the building fails. It's not like the old days. When I grew up in New York City, I lived in a megastructure. It was an enormous 17-story apartment building built in the 1920s, but it was built as a rental building. And from 1920s to the 1970s, it was owned by a property owner who collected rents. And he was responsible for all of the maintenance of the building, and the quality of the size of the rents depended on his maintenance. So he had an incentive to do a good job. And the building was well cared for. And that was the old system. The condominium system is an experiment. And it's a fairly recent experiment. And we've only seen it on the upside of the financial bubble. It works fine. It works great when there's more debt every year. And more, you can pretend that there's more capital every year, But when all of a sudden the capital starts to vanish and go down the slippery slope of deflation and the renunciation of debt, then all of a sudden this way of owning property fails. And I don't think this is appreciated. Now, the reason that they kept on building more of these giant towers is pretty obvious and simple. When you have a building footprint, you have a property that is 100 meters square in Manhattan, there's a tremendous incentive to what's called maximize the floor to area ratio of the building footprint, which means you try to put as many stories of rentable or saleable space on this 100-meter lot as you possibly can to increase the amount of money you're going to make. So the architect gets a bigger commission because it's a bigger building, and the developer gets to sell more units, and so it's purely greed at work. It's not rationality at all. I think a rational urban designer would first of all decide that there is an optimum height of an urban building. That maybe a skyscraper is technologically possible, but maybe it's not really a great way to organize the neighborhood or the block. And it worked for a limited time in New York City and a few other places in the world. It worked for a limited time. I think what we're going to see is that this will be a way of living that had a very short life. And I had a preview of it when I went to Johannesburg. And that's a sort of a special situation, but it's an interesting situation. In Johannesburg, they went through a major political change. And the white government came to an end, and the black government took over. And when that happened, all of the corporations in the old center of Johannesburg, where the skyscrapers were, they all moved their corporate headquarters out of the center to the suburbs,
Center.
where they could fortify them, and have like they felt like they had some control over the physical building. And the towers in this old center all became vertical slums.
Yeah, I've seen those.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
So basically, you have people camping out. It's camping out in a skyscraper. They don't do anything to reconfigure the space. There's still only one bathroom on the floor, but now instead of 2 companies using it, you have 23 families use it, and the space is not broken up into apartments. They just had these crude partitions in the walls.
The windows fell down.
Yeah, the windows fall down. The elevator stopped working 3 years ago, so you have to walk 23 floors up to your house. Pretty soon the plumbing is gone. Some of those towers in Johannesburg actually, they tried to just decommission them by putting walls up around them and putting barbed wire up around them, but still the people go in there and they camp out. So that's a preview of coming attractions.
The Nigerian immigrants in South Africa are very resourceful. It's not a wall or a barbed wire that's going to stop them. Hi to all our friends in South Africa.
Yeah.
So how about we look at your garden? Show us a little bit
sure.
what you have. Here's your orchard garden.
Yeah, this is the garden. It wasn't here when I moved in. I built it myself. The land here is the soil is not that great. It's mostly clay with a lot of rocks in it.
Uh-huh.
And so I decided to start off with raised beds.
Yep.
And I think what will happen over the years is that I'm basically building up a certain kind of soil. Eventually, I'm going to have to find another way to do the beds because the wood's going to disintegrate. And I'll have to find a different way to do the paths between the beds too. But that'll happen. For the moment, this is the disposition of things. And I'm growing mostly table greens and cucumbers. I've got some fava beans, squashes, eggplants, tomatoes, the usual things. I have this structure over here, which we call a hoop house.
Mm-hmm.
And it cost, I think, about $800 in materials to build. It's a certain kind of plastic film that's very, very tough, and it allows the ultraviolet light to go through. And this is a pretty cold climate. We get a very cold winter, but last winter I was able to grow kale and spinach and some other things, some lettuce and stuff, through the winter. And they were still growing in February and March, and some of them went all the way through the winter and started coming back again, in the spring.
Do you manage what percentage, what share of your yearly food supply do you manage to get from your own garden?
Well, that's a good question. Right now, I eat a lot of greens, so I went on the paleo diet about 2-3 years ago, so I eat a lot of Oriental, greens and kind of recipes. So I'm constantly eating bok choy and kale and collard greens and broccoli and this kind of stuff. So it's a big part of my diet. Some of the stuff may be a little frivolous. I grow a lot of parsley because I need the garni.
Yeah.
You got to be civilized.
Of course.
I'm in a peculiar situation right now because I decided about 2 days ago that I need to experiment with not eating vegetables from the nightshade family, which include peppers, tomatoes, and eggplants. And these things are now just starting to come out in my garden.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to give a lot of them away to my friends who live down the block.
Yeah, great.
you know, it's just a peculiar thing. I got clued into the possibility that this kind of vegetable can affect your joints very badly and create a lot of inflammation in your joints. And I have a lot of problems with that, so I decided I better try getting rid of them. I've been addicted to hot peppers for most of my adult life.
That tastes good.
Yeah, so I have to give that up for a month, and they're just starting to come out.
Oh, you can trade it with someone else. And
yeah.
Is your cat good at catching mice?
Yeah, he's real good.
Good.
He's pretty good at mice, and he's not too bad with rabbits.
Oh, you should teach mine. My cats are a bit lazy.
Yeah, I call him the Lion of Prospect Street.
Good.
He's a good boy. Hooter.
Yeah.
So these are the raspberries over here. They're 3 years old, and they're doing very well. It's coming near the end of the crop. They put out a crop in June, and they put out another crop in the fall. So this is near the end of the crop that we just had in the middle of the summer. But there's still some here, and they're really nice.
Yeah, it's the season now.
Whoop.
Whoop. Yummy. I'm going to eat them.
Yeah. So I had a lot of these things.
Tastes good.
Yeah, good to have.
And they're quite large. It's nice.
Yeah, good to have. Good.
Yeah, my kids love them in my farm. I can never eat them because they plunder them. They plunder them before I can get to them.
Do you have a lot of them?
I have a lot of kids and a lot of raspberries.
Yeah. And so this is a winter squash over here.
Yep.
This actually was only 5 plants.
Yeah,
I'm growing them
they
on.
grow.
You can't see it, but I'm growing them on black plastic.
Yes.
To keep the weeds down. Those are those vines that are growing up the tripod are hops, which are used for flavoring in beer.
Yeah.
And there's horseradish down below, and I'm growing a couple of American chestnut trees. The chestnut tree had a big problem in America in the 20th century. There was a blight that developed that killed almost all the chestnut trees. And they took the remaining ones and they created hybrids that were disease resistant. So these are 2 resistant American chestnuts. Over here, this was the only fruit tree, or these were the only fruit trees that were on the property when I moved here. This is a peach. It has no fruit this year. We had a very bad
winter.
We had a bad spring. We had a cold, wet spring. But last year, this thing produced an immense amount of peaches. So I think from year to year, the situation is different.
Yeah.
And this is a pear tree. This was also here originally. I had to prune it severely last year because it was all deformed. And down here, I planted about, 30 apples, pears, cherries, plums, hazelnuts or filberts, gooseberries, currants. I have grapes going along the fence line here, and hardy kiwis. And on the other side there, I have blueberries.
The chickens have their own little
house.
house.
Chickens have their own little habitat down there. We'll go visit the chickens. The apples and pears and cherries are 3 years old. It will take a while before they really produce. I've only got 3 trees that are actually fruiting right now. But, in 2 or 3 more years, I'll be getting some serious fruit out of there. Watch out for the fig tree. Aw. Hey, girls. These are the girls.
Yep. Here's your protein.
Yeah, these are my children. There's 5 of them in all. Mabel, Gladys, Edna, Pearl and Solange. Right? Solange was the girl who ran off to Paris.
Hmm.
So they're immature. They're only 3 months old, and they won't start laying eggs for another few months. But right now they're enjoying their adolescence. I think they're fairly happy and healthy.
And you have deer in this region.
Yes, we have a lot of deer. In fact, the first year I was up here, they were practically living, 3 feet away from the house. And I realized that I could never have fruit trees or a garden without putting up a massive fence.
Yeah.
So I put up an 8-foot-high deer fence. Yeah. I like to say that it's Jurassic Park quality.
Can you use your solar panel electricity to electrify them?
I haven't tried to do that yet. I don't know that I need to electrify the
probably
deer.
not.
Oh, look who's coming. Monsieur Lachette.
Yeah.
He's very busy.
Oh, yeah.
He's going about his schedule, stopping at all his positions. Do you have to supervise the chickens now? Monsieur Lachette?
Yeah, at least cats usually don't eat chickens.
Yeah.
Well, not at this size.
Yeah, I think that he'll stay away. I've seen him with the wild turkeys. You know, he keeps his distance from the wild turkeys.
Oh yeah, they know that what the size is.
Come here. Come here, Scooter. Scooter!
So this is the river next to where you live?
Yes, this is a river called the Battenkill. The word is Dutch, from the old Dutch settlement. And it is a tributary of the Hudson River, which is about 4 miles in that direction. And it's one of the great trout streams of the region. But there are also a lot of factories that were located here. It's the reason that the town exists in the first place.
How do you get along with your neighbors? It's a small town.
I have a lot of friends. I made a lot of friends. I moved out here 2.5 years ago, and I met a lot of people. And I get along with them just fine. And, a lot of them are just normal people. They're not artists necessarily or writers, but, they're just fine.
Normal people is something that's becoming scarce in today's world.
Oh, you think so?
Well, unfortunately.
Uh-oh. So what we're seeing here is the old railroad infrastructure of America. But these trestles are only 150 years old, and they're in worse condition than the Roman ruins in France, which in many cases are still being used. So the life of the industrial civilization in the USA has been very, very short.
Wow.
This is the old railroad yard for this little village, which had 4 factories in it. And, they had to move a lot of stuff in and out. They were making mostly paper products, boxes, toilet paper. So the wood pulp came in and the paper went out. And there was a lot of action here. The railroad has not run for about 20 years. They're using it now for storage for these flatbed cars. And nobody really knows what these cars are for. They've been sitting here for the last 6 months. The guy who owns this property gets paid rent to keep these things in storage, but otherwise there's no action here in the railroad. And over time, the infrastructure of the rail bed and the rails is all falling apart, and nobody's taking care of it. It's a great tragedy because it's a lot less expensive to maintain a railroad track than it is to build a highway, but we're letting all of this conventional rail fall apart. And it's one of the really bad decisions that we made in this society over the last, 40 years.
So where are we going now?
We're just going to tour the terrain a little bit and show you the lay of the land, as we say. Mm-hmm. This is Washington County, New York. We are about 300 kilometers north of New York City, about 20 kilometers from the Vermont border. We're driving east now, It's hilly country. It's a little bit too far away from New York City for the weekenders to come. So a lot of the farms have remained intact. But this used to be a dairy farming region. And dairy farming is going out now. Dairy farming was about a 100-year phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it started in the late 19th century, and then when you get the electronic milk machine, and you get bulk refrigeration, then you can run a big herd.
Yeah.
But before that, it was impossible to run a big herd.
Yeah.
But now
There's only so much cheese you can eat.
Yeah, and these guys can't compete with the dairy farms in Wisconsin and California. So they're going out. But there's a new breed of farmer that's coming in. These young people who produce table greens and things for the restaurants and the
It's great.
farmers markets.
First, milk is bad for us. But it's...
I eat a lot of cheese.
Yeah, cheese is tasty. But it's not super healthy. But yeah, the greens for the way to organic farming. Any young people who don't know what... I always say this to people who write me. I'm 20 years old. I don't know if I need to go to college. Should I become a lawyer? Or I always tell them, look, bicycle repairman or organic green small farm grower. I mean, that's the future.
I know a guy here who's got a farm, and he does 37% of his income comes from his very big hoop house. He's got several hoop houses, producing greens in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, in a climate that's this harsh, it's very interesting to see how much produce you can get out of a place, even in the wintertime.
That's corn?
This is corn. As the old Broadway song goes, the corn is as high as an elephant's eye.
And that's mostly for animal feed or
hard to say. Yeah, I think
probably.
A lot of it probably is for animal feed, but you know, some of it may be for ethanol. It's hard to say.
It's beautiful. So you start to have a lot of friends in the neighborhood?
Yeah, I knew a few people out here already when I moved out, and then I met a whole lot more. I started playing the violin in a whoops, you didn't see me, did you?
Nope.
I started to play the violin in a contra dance band. That's like, you know, English country dancing,
Mm-hmm.
and line dancing for you know, for 18th century music, string band music. So I play the violin in this group, and we have about I don't know, 10 people in this little orchestra, and so they've become good friends. And I also play rock and roll with some other friends, and I don't know, I'm a friendly guy. I met a lot of people.
Would you agree that, as I write in my book, that one of the most important elements for, let's say, survival, or certainly to live well in the world that's coming, is to have strong bonds with people in your neighborhood, so that you create solidarity and mutual help?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that we have the basis for that here.
Yeah, it's still small town America.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people actually who have quite a bit of skill around doing various things. You know, certainly a lot of people who have agricultural skill, a lot of people who can fix engines and you know, do the kinds of things that you need for survival.
Yeah.
People who are not ashamed of defending themselves and knowing how to go about that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sort of semi-wild area around here between the farms, and if you go about another 100 miles north, there's the Adirondack Wilderness, which is an interesting place. It's a big area in the center of northern New York that is bigger than Yellowstone out west, and it, in some ways, is wilder because the forest is a lot thicker here in the east than it is in the west.
So yeah, so back to what it was in the early days of the conquest of the East.
Well, yeah.
With the Minutemen and the militias and living in farmlands and in those states. The good old days.
Yeah. Well, so we're driving through this area now that is mostly, forest. And the reason for that is we're up on a ridge. So this is a high elevation where they don't do so much farming.
Yeah.
And then when you get down a little bit, then you're back in the farm area.
The roads are all clean and they seem to be fairly new.
They repaved this road. Right now, we seem to be able to do that. I'm not so confident that that will be the case going forward in the future. This is a part of the United States that still has a certain amount of culture. People still read books and they go to concerts and they are interested in music and they're interested in education and they're literate. There are other parts of the country where that's not so true.
And I guess in these parts of America, people are also very much still the nice, genuine, down-to-earth, kind people with kind heart that you always find everywhere in the world, by the way, in countrysides and not necessarily like town people. I always found, I don't know, what's your favorite movie?
My favorite movie?
Yeah.
I think my favorite movie is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou by the Coen brothers.
It's a fun one.
And they are my favorite movie makers.
Yeah,
these guys are so smart and so funny. So several of their movies are my favorite movies. Their movie Miller's Crossing is my next favorite movie. I also like the remake they made of True Grit. It's a wonderful movie. I was a big fan of Robert Altman, who has passed away.
Yeah.
But he was a great movie maker of the 1970s.
Well, I tell you, one of my least favorite movies is Deliverance.
Oh yeah, Deliverance.
Because they
get down and squeal like a pig, boy.
Exactly. And they I don't know if it's based on some real communities of West Virginia, but still, town people making fun of the people on the countryside.
Yeah.
It's very typical and inaccurate, because really the people from the countryside usually they're really kind and nice and not like they pictured in some of those movies as degenerate and completely pervert. The perverts and the degenerate usually are the town people.
Yes, true. Or the suburban guys.
Yeah, even worse.
The guys who live in those little suburban bungalows who, bury teenagers under their crawl space.
Oh, they do this in Belgium.
Oh yeah, they're big on that in Belgium, huh?
I don't know if they're big, but some got found.
No
obviously, they always found the people who are poor who do that, not the networked people who are rich.
So now we're looking east over toward Vermont, is what you're seeing in those blue hills in the background.
How's for you? Like people, right?
Oh yeah, I really do like people, and I'm a very sociable person, and I'm not cynical at all about thinking the worst of everybody.
Exactly.
I generally think that people are pretty good, and I like meeting them, and I like meeting new people all the time, and I do spend a lot of time by myself because I'm divorced. I do have a girlfriend, but she's not there all the time. I work alone, obviously, because I'm a writer. I spend a lot of my spare time alone because I'm very interested in painting, and this occupies a lot of my spare time. So, Giorgio O'Keeffe, the great America. Let me say that again. Giorgio O'Keeffe, the great American painter, was once asked about spending a lot of time alone, and she said, "The cure for loneliness is solitude." She was a wise old girl.
And of course, if the wrong kind of people come, you're not shy either to use your constitutional right to defend yourself.
Well, that's true. It happens that I am licensed under New York State law to carry a pistol, and I'm not ashamed of it or afraid of it, and I learned how to use it, and I don't have a lot of fantasies about using it, so I'm not weird that way.
Good.
But you know, I'm not politically correct about it.
You also there's a big trend in the United States to try to be like Europe, to be very shy and banning guns, because we know that it's gun who kill people, right?
Yeah. Well,
the trigger is kills on its own, right?
That's right.
So the gun must be the problem. But certainly there is a lot of debate right now in the United States.
Well, the interesting thing to me about the situation is that there's all this debate about whether the gun kills the people or the people kills the people. But I think what is actually killing the people is the physical arrangement of life in America, and how depressing it is, and how depressing the suburbia is, and how depressing it is to not have public places and to be isolated and not be able to have casual adult encounters of of a social nature, and to live in a place that makes you feel alienated. That's what's characteristic of America, and I think particularly of school children. Mm-hmm. And I believe that that's largely responsible for a lot of the violence and aggression and anger and frustration and depression. You know, America has turned itself into a land full of mentally ill people because they live in environments that are so psychologically punishing and unrewarding that it makes them crazy.
Plus the food, the medicine.
Yeah, then you bring in the food and the medication and the drugs, the illegal drugs, like methadone, which also makes people nuts and makes them do crazy things. And you've got a perfect recipe for antisocial behavior.
But it's easier to blame the guns.
Yeah, easier to blame the gun.
So James, I brought you some saucisson from the Charente region in France, and some wine as well. So it's I guess you don't get this often in the US. The real one from France.
No, we eat cheese doodles and hamburgers and little Debbie snack cakes, and that's all.
So you have to try this one.
Okay, salud.
And thanks for everything. Ciao.
Oh, you're welcome.
Take care.
Bye bye.